welcome to this final session of the Road of Wisdom. This is session 16, The Woman of Strength, Part 2. While traveling through Kyrgyzstan, Eloise Dicker lost her late mother's treasured gold bracelet. Here is her recounting of the story. It was on the second day of our 5-day trek that I realized it was missing. We had packed up the tents and loaded the horses. I reached up to the horse's mane to pull myself up, and I saw that my wrist was bare. My mom's bracelet, it's gone, I thought, and I immediately burst into tears. Made from melted down rings she inherited from her own mother, the bracelet had always been worn by my mom for almost as long as I could remember. Now I felt pain in my throat and a sinking feeling in my stomach. It could be anywhere in this vast landscape, the Tian Shan Mountains of Kyrgyzstan, Central Asia. There was a silence as we all realized there was no point in even trying to find it. We were 2 days up in the mountains and surrounded by grass. I had one last look around our camp. It was no use. I couldn't retrace my steps. We were in the middle of nowhere. I climbed back on the horse. I walked behind the others, crying and thinking. All the memories of her passing away came back to me bit by bit. My naked wrist still made me feel incomplete. I wanted to go back in time to the moment I decided to bring it with me. Why hadn't I left it at home? But maybe it was meant to be here, I thought to myself. Mom was born in Hong Kong and grew up in the UK, and this was halfway. An endless, lush landscape with wild horses, snowy peaks, birds of prey, and the sounds of the river. Maybe it should be lost here. That night, I looked in the tents with a bit of hope left that it might be in some corner. Nothing. I crawled into my sleeping bag, feeling deeply sad, and accepted it was gone for good. I'd already made peace with the loss of the bracelet when, some weeks after I had returned to Europe, I received a Facebook message from Elaman Asanbayev, one of the guides from the community-based tourism office in Karakol. There was a picture attached. "This is it or not? I don't know, he asked. It was the bracelet. It was suddenly back in existence. But what should I do? Should I get Elaman to send it? Should I leave it there, ask him to throw it in the river? When I looked into secure courier services, they advised against sending precious stones or metals. I was also reluctant to trust the postal system, it being so far away. It did occur to me that I could find someone who would be willing to travel there, but when I saw that flights were cheap in November, I decided I would go and get it myself. London, Moscow, Bishkek, then a 6-hour drive from the capital to Karakol with Azamat Azanov, the CBT manager. It was 5 a.m. and -11 in the capital. The roads were icy and thick with snow. The next morning, we picked up Elaman. "This is for you," he said as he jumped in the car. There it was, the slim piece of gold that I had known all my life. This part of Mum, here in the car, 7,000 kilometers, that's about 4,300 miles from home in the freezing mountains of Kyrgyzstan. There was another day in the snow on horseback before I turned around and I made the long 21-hour journey back home. What strikes me about this story is not merely that the bracelet was made of precious gold. Its value is far more than the material it was made of. It was precious because of who it came from, what it represented, and the memories it carried. To someone else, it may have looked like a slim piece of jewelry, but to Eloise, it was a most precious treasure. And because it was a treasure, she did not treat its recovery lightly. Once she learned that it was found, she crossed national borders, took multiple flights, endured cold roads and mountain passes, and traveled thousands of miles to safely retrieve it. Why? Because when something is truly that precious, you do not say, "That's just too much trouble. I'll let them mail it to me." You say, "Whatever it takes, it's worth it." And that is the emotional weight and significance behind the question in Proverbs chapter 31, verse 10. An excellent wife, or also could be translated a woman of strength, who can find? For her value is far above rubies. The question is not asked because such a woman is imaginary, which she is, because she is an idealistic literary figure. It is because such a woman is so rare. She's not common. She's not cheap. She's not to be taken for granted. When she is found, she's to be recognized, honored, and treasured as the most precious possession we can have. Well, in this final section of Proverbs, it opens with this question that's more than just simply an inquiry. The proverb is not asking this because it thinks the reader lacks information. It's a rhetorical question. It's a figure of speech known as eretesis. It's meant to awaken the listener, the reader's imagination, and impress upon their heart the most extraordinary rarity and value of the woman that is about to be described. It's the kind of question that makes the room go silent. We might compare it to someone asking, well, where can you find a person whose word is always reliable, whose hands are always diligent, whose heart is always generous, and whose life strengthens all those around them? The question itself suggests the answer. Such a person is not easily found. The excellent wife or woman of strength is rare, not because good women do not exist, but because the combination of knowledge, strength, faithfulness, diligence, courage, and reverence for Yahweh is precious beyond is precious beyond calculation. And if such a woman is immeasurably valuable, then she is exceedingly difficult to find. That sense of her immeasurable value is immediately reinforced by the statement that her value is far more than rubies. This is not accidental or like flowery language. Earlier in Proverbs, wisdom herself is said to be more precious than rubies, and nothing anyone desires can compare with her. That's Proverbs chapter 3, verse 15. By using similar language here, the woman of Proverbs 31 is being deliberately linked with Lady Wisdom, who's been calling out to the reader throughout the book. As we've discussed in the opening chapters, wisdom cries out in the streets, urging the young and inexperienced to listen, to learn, and to live. By the end of the book, that same wisdom is no longer merely an abstract voice in the marketplace or in the streets. She's taken shape as a living woman. She's seen in the household, in the marriage, in the city gate, at the city gates, in the community, and she's at the port and the business district. And that's why the opening question of the poem serves as a call to reflection, especially for young men who form the primary audience of Proverbs. After 30 chapters of instruction, warnings, appeals, the reader is invited to ask what kind of life he truly values. Will he be captivated by outer beauty, curiosity, excitement and adventure, or pleasures? Or will he have the discernment to prize the enduring character and discipline of wisdom? The question, who can find, is meant to train our desires. The proverb does not merely say, well, find a wife. Rather, it's saying, learn what is worth finding. It directs us to look beyond the charm or the social status or the physical attraction or the momentary excitement, and to learn to value the deeper qualities that build a stable and fruitful life. In this sense, the poem is not really about praising an ideal woman. It's about educating the reader's judgment, teaching us what to admire, what to pray for, what to pursue, and the wisdom-shaped character that we need to recognize and embrace. The question also brings the entire book of Proverbs full circle. At the beginning, the young man is urged to seek wisdom as a treasure, to find her as one that finds life and favor from Yahweh. And at the end now, he encounters the woman of strength with integrity and moral character. She is the concrete embodiment of wisdom. Wisdom's not presented as something that's just reserved for the temples or the courts or the classrooms or public debates. It is proven to be necessary in the marketplace, in the kitchen, in business dealings, in planning, in social engagements, in neighborhoods, in bedtime routines, and in raising children, and in striving for dreams and aspirations. The poem tells us that the life of wisdom reaches its mature expression in the detailed relations of ordinary life. The opening question then is not merely, well, where can I find such a woman? It's more importantly, do we have eyes wise enough to recognize how much she is worth? The final portrait that we're going to look at is not just a sentimental description of an admirable or excellent wife with her domestic duties all taken care of. Rather, this is the book's closing vision on how to see wisdom. And as I mentioned previously, the translation can be a woman of strength, virtue, valor, could be an excellent wife, a capable wife. These are different ways that the phrase Eshet Chayil can be translated. And this matters because while the woman is couched in terms of a wife, it's not just simply about a domestic or social convention. She is strong, she is capable, she is virtuous, she is wise. And Proverb has already personified wisdom and understanding and discretion and discernment as female characters throughout the book, especially in the early chapters of 1 through 9. So when the reader now arrives at Proverbs 31, it's natural to see this woman depicted as more than one isolated example of an excellent wife or woman of strength. And so this female figure pulls together all the threads of the major themes of wisdom in Proverbs and weaves them together into a tapestry of living wisdom. She shows what happens when wisdom is no longer just admired or quoted or studied, but is actually lived and practiced every day. The first virtue that Proverbs mentions about the woman of strength is trustworthiness. And what goes along with that is covenant faithfulness. In Proverbs chapter 31, verses 11 and 12, it says, "The heart of her husband trusts in her, and she brings him good and not evil all the days of her life." This wisdom is being expressed here through being reliable. The woman's not unpredictable. She's not manipulative or self-serving. People close to her, like her husband, feel safe and they trust in her because she consistently seeks their good. This connects with Proverbs chapter 3, where the wise are told, "Do not let covenant loyalty and faithfulness leave you. Bind them around your neck, write them upon the table of your heart." That's Proverbs 3:3. The woman of strength is what that looks like in daily life. Faithfulness has moved from a commandment to a character trait. This kind of trustworthiness is especially powerful because it's built slowly. Anyone can make a strong impression in a moment, but genuine trust is built by repeated faithfulness over time. It's like a bridge that does not prove its strength by looking impressive the day after it's completed, but by remaining strong throughout any weather and carrying the weight of all the transportation across it day after day. A wise person becomes the kind of person others can lean on without fear that they will collapse under the weight. The woman of strength carries responsibility without resentment or feeling burdened. Her life teaches that wisdom is not only knowing the right thing, but consistently doing the right thing. That is the kind of person who is stable, reliable, and faithful, and can be trusted under any circumstance. The woman of strength also embodies the qualities of diligence, skill, and hard work. In Proverbs 31, verses 13 through 19, it says, "She seeks out wool and linen, and with delight she works with her hands. She's like the ships of a merchant. She brings in her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night and provides food for her household and tasks for her female servants. She considers a field and purchases it. From the fruit of her hands she plants a vineyard. She wraps her wrists with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her gain is good. Her lamp does not go out during the night. She stretches out her hand to the distaff, and her hand grasps the spindle." This is not frantic busyness that she's occupied with. It's purposeful, productive work. Proverbs has already praised diligence as a sign of wisdom many times. For example, the poor person works with an idle palm, but a diligent hand makes one rich, Proverbs 10:4. And the hand of the diligent will rule, but the slack hand will become a forced laborer, Proverbs 12:24. The woman of strength is the living example of these sayings. She does not merely talk about doing things. She applies herself skillfully through disciplined action, and she is prudent about how she exerts herself in her work. Hard work is not wise just because it is intense labor and focused exertion. Hard work becomes wise when the effort is applied with understanding toward producing value and with shrewd and careful decision-making. It says that she considers a field and purchases it, not done on a whim, not done out of some sort of dreamy, romantic idea. It's thoughtfully done. And this is a needed corrective in a world where that often separates spirituality from ordinary labor. Proverbs does not treat work as something that distracts a person from pursuing wisdom, but as the primary arena where wisdom is proven. The woman of strength invests herself in spinning, trading, purchasing, planting, and preparing, all of which are not beneath her dignity. They are expressions of wisdom. A modern comparison might be somebody who carefully manages a household budget, maybe mentors younger believers, prepares family meals, starts a small business, tends to a garden faithfully, and helps with the needs of others. However, we must be careful to understand that wisdom is not about doing everything. It's about how we do everything that we do, so that we are ordering our life in such a way as not to neglect what God has entrusted to us. Well, closely connected to diligence is prudence and foresight and preparedness. In the beginning of Proverbs, one of the purposes of the book is to give prudence to the naive and knowledge and discretion to the youth. That's Proverbs chapter 1, verse 4. The woman of strength displays exactly this. With knowledge and discretion, she prepares clothing for her household, so she's not afraid when it snows, as it says in Proverbs 31, verse 21. And she keeps watch over the activities of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness, as it says in verse 27. Prudence is wisdom with tomorrow in mind. It is forward thinking. It's not anxiety, but it's readiness for whatever may come. There is a difference between fearfully imagining every possible disaster that could come upon you and faithfully preparing for real possibilities. The prudent person does not say, "Oh well, God will provide," as an excuse for laziness, nor does the prudent person say, "Everything depends on me," as an excuse for fear and anxiety. Instead, the prudent person perceives God's world as a place where actions have consequences and life is filled with unforeseeable circumstances. The woman of strength is not afraid of the future because she has not ignored the present. Like someone who fills the gas tank before taking a long trip, or who keeps spare batteries in their drawer at home, or who saves gradually for an upcoming expense. The woman of strength shows that small acts of preparation and foresight can have a powerful impact on life. Now, the woman of strength is not productive merely for her own benefit. As Proverbs 31:20 says, she extends her hands to the afflicted, and she stretches out her hands to the needy. This connects directly with a saying mentioned earlier in the chapter: open your mouth for those who have no voice, judge with righteousness, and defend the cause of the afflicted and needy person. That's from verses 8 and 9 in Proverbs 31. It also reflects Proverbs chapter 3, verse 27, which says, do not withhold a good thing from those to whom it is due, when it is in the power of your hands to do it. Wisdom does not look inward to personal success for one's own sake, but outwardly for the benefit of others. And this is one of the clearest signs that the woman of strength's prosperity has not become selfishness. She has resources, skill, influence, but she uses them to bless and provide for the needs of others. As Proverbs chapter 11, verse 25 says, the person who blesses others will be made prosperous, and the one who waters, indeed, he himself will be watered. The woman of strength is like a well in a village. She's not diminished by giving out water. Her purpose is fulfilled by it, and she is constantly supplied so that she can continue serving others. In ministry, family life, community life, wisdom always asks, how can I be strong, kind, and helpful for those who are here? The woman of strength also embodies a careful use of her mouth with wise speech and life-giving words. Proverbs chapter 31, verse 26 says, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and instruction about covenant faithfulness is upon her tongue. This is the culmination of many earlier proverbs about the importance of how we use our mouth and our tongue. Proverbs chapter 10 says, the mouth of the righteous person is a fountain of life. That's in verse 11. And also, the lips of the righteous shepherd many people, verse 21. And then in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 18, it says, the tongue of the wise brings healing. And in Proverbs 15, verse 4, it adds that a healing tongue is a tree of life. The woman of strength shows that wisdom is therefore not silent competence, but it's letting one's words be a spring of life-giving grace to all those who hear it. She knows when to speak, she knows how to speak, and she knows what kind of words to use that will build others up and not tear them down. I'm sure many of us have experienced the wisdom of the right word spoken at the right time. It has a powerful result. Maybe it looks like a parent who corrects a child without being overbearing, or a mentor who identifies a quality in you that you do not see in yourself, or a friend who tells you the truth with love and kindness. The woman of strength teaches that wisdom is audible. It has a tone, it has a timing, and it has a tenderness to achieve its desired effect. Her words are faithful and true because they reflect the loyal love and truth of God. Now, the next virtue of wisdom that the woman of strength exemplifies can be found in verse 25, which says, strength and majesty are her clothing, and she laughs at the days to come. This does not mean that she's naive about suffering or immune to hardship. Rather, she has cultivated a life of such wisdom, faithfulness, prudence, and reverence for God that the future does not tyrannize her in mental bondage and fear. Proverbs chapter 3 describes wisdom's ways as pleasant ways, and her pathways are peace. And it says that wisdom is a tree of life to those who take hold of her. In Proverbs chapter 14, it says, in the fear of Yahweh, there is strong confidence, and his children will have a refuge. That's Proverbs 14, verse 26. The woman of strength's courage grows from the life she has chosen in listening to and following wisdom. There's something very deeply compelling about a person who's not easily shaken. Not because life is easy or that they treat intense life situations trivially, but because their life has been ordered around what is true. And that provides a solid foundation for everything else to not be shaken when the storms of life come. The woman of strength is clothed in dignity or majesty, the text says, because she's not living for people's applause and approval, but or she's not being dismissive about real trouble or the pain that life brings. She's strong because she's submitted herself to wisdom. She lets wisdom be the principal thing that directs her life. And then she can laugh at the days to come because she has built her life on something that's sturdier than potential circumstances and what ifs. Whatever may come, she is ready to face it head on without fear or timidity. And that brings us to the final and the most important virtue that the woman of strength embodies, and that is the fear of Yahweh. Proverbs says at the outset, in the introduction to the book, in chapter 1, verse 7, the fear of Yahweh is the beginning of knowledge, while fools show contempt for wisdom and sound teaching. Proverbs also teaches that those who seek wisdom, like silver and hidden treasure, will understand the fear of Yahweh and find the knowledge of God because Yahweh gives wisdom. Proverbs chapter 2, verses 1 through 6. This same theme becomes the final evaluation of the woman of strength, where Proverbs chapter 31, verse 30 says, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears Yahweh, she will be praised. Now that placement is significant. Proverbs does not end by praising success or status or wealth or children or education or even productivity as the deepest source of her worth. It ends by saying that the center of her life is reverence for and obedience to Yahweh. That's what it means to have the fear of Yahweh. This matters because, as I've mentioned time and again, wisdom in Proverbs is not practical cleverness or just cunning ideas. It is moral and spiritual alignment with the way God has ordered the world and life to work. A person can be efficient without being wise, impressive without being righteous, or they can be successful without being faithful or having integrity. However, the example of the woman of strength teaches us that wisdom begins in a life that's dedicated to Yahweh. And that wisdom then radiates outward into everything else she does. Her business dealings, her speech, her generosity, her planning, and her household care, they all flow from her God-centered life. She's like a tree whose visible fruit is very impressive, but because of the unforeseen roots that she has, which are deep and nourishing, to be able to provide that fruit. You see, people may admire the branches and the fruit and the shade and the beauty of the tree, but the tree stands because of what is not seen, or because of what is hidden underground. And in the same way, the woman of strength demonstrates many aspects of visible excellence, but her success is enabled and sustained by an inner life of devotion to Yahweh. Back in Proverbs chapter 8, wisdom is described as calling out in public, at the crossroads and city gates, in various places in public spaces, inviting all humankind to listen, receive instruction, and find life. And then in Proverbs 9, it shows wisdom building her house, preparing her table, and inviting the naive to leave their simple ways and live. And now here in Proverbs 31, wisdom's house is no longer only an invitation, it is a lived reality. The woman of strength has become the type of house and household that wisdom is seeking to build. Her life depicts one that has answered wisdom's call. And that is why we find in the final verse of Proverbs something so fitting. It says, "Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her at the city gates." Earlier, as wisdom was crying out at the city gates, now the woman of strength who embodies all the virtues of wisdom, she is to be praised at the city gates. The book of Proverbs ends by showing that the fruit of wisdom will be known. And the woman of strength stands as the mature portrait of a life that is shaped by godliness, faithfulness, diligence, prudence, generosity, wise speech, and courage. She's not merely an example to admire from a distance or in our imagination or on the page of the Bible. She is calling for us to learn from her and to become the kind of person we were always meant to be, a person whose life is centered on the road of wisdom. I hope you have enjoyed this introduction to the book of Proverbs. If you have any questions or would like to ask anything about the class, the book of Proverbs, or anything about the Bible in general, you can reach me at jerry@lhim.org. So I appreciate your attention, and I hope this class has blessed you. Thank you very much.